Today, in Draw My Life, the best kept story of the Ninja Turtles. Back in 1980s in Dover, New Hampshire, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird published the first comic book about the lives of 4 young turtles: Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo. Unfortunately, when the show was at the peak of its success, one of the most hidden and terrifying scripts came to light. The responsible was a fan, or supposedly that's what Peter Laird said, who is now the sole owner of the rights to the series since he fought with his friend and co-creator. But before we carry on, subscribe and hit that little bell to find out about many more stories. Let's start from the top. In 1984, 3,000 copies of the 40 pages of the first edition of the Ninja Turtles, created by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, were printed. However, there is something that very few know, and that is that this wasn't the first story that they did. Apparently, Kevin and Peter had written a first version of the Ninja Turtles before, but this one was too, and when I say too, I mean deadly, violent, and dark to make public. Everyone knows that in 1987, when the Ninja Turtles cartoon series premiered, the show turned out to be very different from the comics, as the Turtles were too violent. Due to criticism from many parents, they gradually made them friendlier. However, what very few know is that the first episode never aired because it was almost impossible to watch, read, or even to imagine. And believe me, because I'm the biggest fan of creepy stories. In 1993, ratings began to drop, so the creators were shortly facing one of the toughest moments for the Ninja Turtles. In the midst of that chaos, one day, Peter received a letter from a fan telling him that he was his neighbor and that his greatest dream would be to have one of the comics signed by him. Peter didn't hesitate and invited him to his house. A strange decision for someone so busy and famous, don't you think? That evening, everything seemed normal, or so Peter told in an interview after the saved chapter was published. "I've always been very devoted to my fans. This young man wrote to me, I received him at my house, I signed one of the copies, we took a picture, and he left." In an interview, Peter also confessed that the fan broke into the studio without his consent and stole a script hidden in one of the drawers. This was titled Ninja Turtles: The Kidnapping of Raphael. The story began with Raphael completely disoriented, tied on his feet to chains without his shell, with blood coming out of his mouth, and about to bleed to death. The evil Shredder, also known as Orokusaki, had murdered the sister of the Ninja Turtles. Yes, as you hear, there is a fifth, and had kidnapped Raphael. The death of the female turtle had been gruesome. Shredder had choked her to death and did it in front of all her siblings, who had been badly wounded. After this murder and leaving Leonardo, Donatello, and Michelangelo badly wounded, he then kidnapped Raphael and tortured him by slowly and painfully removing his shell. He then began to brutally beat him all over his body until he almost killed him. Luckily, his brothers managed to rescue him and take him home, but he was in a very bad health. After a few minutes, while tears were streaming down his cheeks, Raphael died. The episode ended with the funeral of Raphael and his sister. Leonardo, Donatello, and Michelangelo swore to avenge the death of the two. And so it began the adventures of these 3 vengeful and hateful Ninja Turtles. Very different from the ones we know now. As you have already seen, this episode was too tragic to be made public. As you know, they decided not to kill Raphael and that they were only 4 instead of 5 turtles. Although the episode was never aired at its beginning, it was also never removed from the archives of its creators. And even though the episode was leaked, eyes were fixed on a deranged fan. It's actually claimed that the one who put it in the reach of the fans was Peter himself. This made Kevin and Peter part ways in 1988 due to major differences. It's said that Peter did it to regain the show's popularity. It was the right time to get the media's attention again. Despite the barrage of criticism that followed the leak of this terrible episode, Peter was still attached to his characters, and that is why he bought Eastman's shares in 2000. And now that you know this story, you won't find it strange that a new Ninja Turtle appeared in a 1997 episode of the Power Rangers and the series that followed it. And guess who was? That's right, they have added a 5th ninja to the Turtles, a woman. Could this possibly be the turtle sister whom Shredder killed in the hidden episode? Would you be brave enough to watch this episode? Leave us in the comments who's your favorite turtle, and see you next time.